Today on Ministry Monday, I am speaking to Michael Silhavy. Hi, Michael. How are you today?
I am well, glad to be here.
Thank you for being here on Ministry Monday. I'm thrilled to be talking with you about the Liturgy of the Hours and the Divine Office Hymnal.
There it is.
Ding! It looks so nice. It really
It
does.
is nice.
So, we're going to talk a lot about the hymnal itself today. But before we even get to that point, would you mind giving us a little bit of context as we kind of consider the timeline of the Divine Office Hymnal, maybe starting with when it was first approved by the USCCB?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think it's important to realize that in some ways we're still attending to the revisions of those first English language translations that happened after the Vatican Council. And I think, as folks are aware, currently the Liturgy of the Hours for English speaking Catholics, certainly here in the US, is under revision. The bishops have been looking at psalm translations, canticle translations, adding saints, making adaptations as needed. And one of the elements that is under revision are the hymns for the hours. Now, those of you who have your 4-volume set, you know that there is a hymn appointed for the day. It's merely a suggestion, but there are hymns in there. What the Divine Office Hymnal is are the English translations of the hymns that appear in the Latin edition of the Liturgy of the Hours. So, as this current English language translation is taking part, the idea was, hey, why not make available the English translation of the Latin, just like we would do with the Liturgy of the Hours itself? So that's where it comes from. I think the book itself came out about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It is the work of ISIL. It is their work. They did the translation. They did the assigning of tunes, and it has been out for just a little while now, and it's there for the using and taking. So we can also talk about how it can be used and how individual hymns can be accessed and things like that. But I think that's a simple enough introduction. This is just part of the ongoing revision, and this is a brand new hymnal that contains English translations of the Latin hymns from the office.
Why the changes?
Well, I'll consider myself part of this. I mean, when I grew up, I'm realizing that I maybe made my first communion with the first year of the revised sacramentary, back in 70, 69 back then.
Hmm.
Um, I remember when uh, we had a funeral rite, and then whoops, here comes a new funeral rite in 1988 or 89. I think we forget that these translations are going to be ongoing, first of all. So it's not like we have come up with one translation and that'll serve us for another 100 years. No, there probably will be these constant revisions. And this latest revision was simply a chance to look at perhaps 50 years of using what was there already and just evaluating what was working, what wasn't working, what were some of the current visions for translation. And as savvy viewers will know, there have been many approaches to how translation is to be done. And this adheres to one of the translation guidelines. So more saints need to be added, more saints for the universal calendar, more saints for uh, local conferences of bishops, territories, countries. So just a realization that, yeah, these things are always in some way going to be under revision.
Is there any direction about hymns in the Liturgy of the Hours from the general instruction itself of the Liturgy of the Hours?
Right. So thank you. So yes, of course, just as the Roman Missal
Hmm.
has its own general instruction, the Liturgy of the Hours has its own instruction. And there is a paragraph 173. I like the way it holds up the role of hymns. It's a brief paragraph, so I'll read it here. It says, hymns generally have an immediate effect in creating the particular quality of the hour or individual feast, more so than other parts of the office, and are able to move the heart and mind to devotion, a power frequently enhanced by the beauty of their style. In the office, the hymns are the chief poetic elements contributed by the church. Okay, but I think that very first line, nothing tells you better what you're going to celebrate than the hymn.
Hmm.
And as basic as that seems, it's morning, let's sing a morning hymn. It's afternoon, let's sing a hymn that talks about contemplating our labor that day. It's evening, let's talk about uh, a chance for forgiveness and reflection and where we may have erred in the course of the day. It's night. Let's sing a hymn that talks of hopeful resurrection. Hymns announce the saint, the season. So hymns really are the vehicle for that clear, aha, here is what we're celebrating today. Now, granted, most of us know that, but nonetheless, it is just nice to have that poetic reflection on the day or the hour or the season. And as we look at some texts, you'll see that we've now been given this breadth of texts on all of these topics. Um, where many of us might have been content with 3 or 4 morning hymns, 3, 4, or 5 evening hymns. We now have the access to dozens of new texts. And so it's not so much these hymns existing solely in the booklet, but these hymns now also being able to used at Sunday Eucharist or other celebrations. But we're just greatly now enriching the offerings that we have to celebrate uh, hymns for the hours and celebrations and feasts and seasons. I think there's something like 300 hymn texts in the book, and all of them are set to 2 melodies, which is also interesting. So it's not only going to be a new sense, a new chance to learn new texts, but in some instances, new tunes. There is a metrical hymn tune, and there is a chant tune. Uh, and once again, if a place is using this regularly, daily during the year, how nice to have that variety. But yeah, a wonderful collection of both new tunes and new texts for us.
Okay, so you mentioned that there are 300 hymns, but of those, how many of those are metrical tunes or how many of them are chant? What can we expect there?
Yeah, I believe we counted somewhere around 50 metrical hymns, and there are close to 130 chant melodies. So just a little bit shy of 200 tunes. And once again, many or some of the texts appear with the same melody. And there are even a few texts that appear with multiple chant melodies, perhaps one that's a little more simpler and one that's a little bit more involved in that spirit of progressive solemnity. That here's a little bit more elaborate melody for use on this day. So about 200 distinct musical tunes and chant melodies.
So, if you don't mind me asking, who chose the tunes for the hymnal?
Mm-hmm. So the tunes themselves were chosen by a committee from ISIL. And once again, this is intended to be a worldwide English speaking publication. And as one can imagine, there are some solid American tunes that we know. There are tunes much more common in the British Isles. Of course, there are standard hymn tunes from German or French sources. Um, and I think as we're looking at these texts and tunes, it's also important to remember that these are there for the taking. They're not required. So if you are doing the Liturgy of the Hours in your parish or community, there's a hymn there to be used, but you're under no obligation to use it. So don't be afraid if you look at a tune and say, I don't know the chant tune or the metrical tune. Just because of the origin of these, the Latin construct, a vast majority of these tunes are in long meter, 8 syllables, 8 syllables, 8 syllables, 8 syllables per line, long meter. So there will be no shortage of tunes that you can do to sing these texts to. And I think as a lot of us do on Sunday worship, it's okay if the folks aren't seeing the notes above the text. And if someone approaches you and says, you didn't sing the notes that were printed, I hope you invite that person to choir if that concerns them that much. But
I was hoping
so
you'd say
yeah,
that, yes.
the uh, the texts are constructed in a way that other tunes can be shared. One thing that the bishops have asked us to do in this regard is, um, while there is this permission to sing these texts to other tunes, they would like those of us who are publishing hymnals or having composers do settings of these hymns to stay with the assigned tunes for just a couple of years. I think there's a provision in our contract as to what we can license as the administrator of these texts. And that's not any type of hardball or mean decision, but I think it's really trying to say, hey, let's give these a chance. And wouldn't it be nice if we can enshrine some sort of marriage, yoking between text and tune? Uh, Probably most of us are very comfortable with, oh, radiant light, oh, sun divine. That's just a nice pairing that we have embraced. And maybe there are some new pairings that we'll find satisfying. Um, we'll give it a couple years. If not, then let's try these texts with other tunes. But I respect and appreciate their care that we try to limit the creativity in what's published just for a few years to give these yokings a chance to catch on.
Are there any other nuances in these hymns that we should be maybe prepared for? Maybe it looks a little bit different than what we're used to.
Yes. And this is a great source of delight because it took a while for me to get on board with this. And I have got some colleagues, teachers, mentors, uh, who have maybe grumbled a little bit about the fact that by and large, these hymns don't rhyme.
Oh.
And it's almost that case of, well, it's not a poem unless it rhymes. Well, no, we know that's not true. And what this is a rendering of the Latin. The Latin texts don't always rhyme. And I find that interesting. Could they have made them rhyme? Sure, they could have. But one of the reasons not using rhyme might be even a more direct, faithful, poetic, intentional translation of what's there. Not that literal is always perfect or necessary, but it kind of freed up the translators to really capture what was there. If the line, Christ the brave lion, beautiful poetry, if that was in the Latin, it's nice to be able to capture that same sentiment in English. Another thing that I loved hearing from the folks at ICE who prepared this was the realization that so often these hymns will be prayed by individuals. Now, we know that ideally prayer is a communal experience, but I bet most individuals who pray the Liturgy of the Hours do not sing the hymns aloud. Maybe some do. Wonderful, ideal, fantastic. But in reality, that probably doesn't happen. And perhaps it's good enough for them to read these translations of the hymns without rhyme. One more thing I want to say about this, and I do give them credit for how they had to think about this. As we know, one of the translation values that we uphold in the Grail translation of the Liturgy of the Hours is that sprung rhythm, the metrical rhythm. Have mercy on me, God, in your kindness, in your compassion, blot out my offense. So that's the 1963 translation. But when we translated from the Latin to the Grail, there was the desire to keep that integrity of the Hebrew poetry. We didn't need to keep that, or the translators, Joseph Gelino and his team, did not need to keep that element of the original psalmody, but it was brought into English. Just maybe in some way, in a similar way, we can say, okay, we like our hymns to rhyme. That's not how the original is. And they have respected a poetic convention, and we'll be okay with it. So it's fun to encounter them. Just be prepared. We're so used to rhyme, and just give it a chance. Yeah.
Let's talk also about the chant and unaccompanied singing that's included in the Divine Office hymnal.
Mhm.
So, first off, is there an accompaniment for things like that?
Yes, there is a 2-volume accompaniment,
Okay.
spiral bound,
Okay.
and every hymn appears. And so, yes, every hymn has an accompaniment, your standard keyboard accompaniment, simple enough that it would be well under the fingers for piano or organ. So accompaniments are there for those who want to use them. When we have our metrical hymns, sometimes they feel better with accompaniment. And that's almost even part of the hymn itself, the harmony and the voice leading and everything that adds to the complete experience of the hymn. Chant, when it's unaccompanied, also, of course, as you well know, gives you the ability not to be wedded to a particular pitch. Morning hymns might want to be pitched a little bit lower. Um, Not too low, though, because don't forget, next time your congregation is singing the Lord's Prayer or something a cappella, listen to all of those people who just kind of sing an octave below.
Right.
And if we're pitching something, our Father who art in heaven, and our sub singers are going, Our Father who art
Yeah.
in heaven. Listen to the men. And if we start to pitch things lower,
Mhm.
it makes it even harder for those sub singers. Our Father who art in. So I'm not a big fan of lowering keys, but of course, the beauty of the unaccompanied melody, the chant melodies, are that they can be much more satisfying in different tonalities,
Right.
starting pitches.
Okay, let's stay on chant for just a second, though. So you mentioned that there is chant present in the Divine Office hymnal, but what should we expect in terms of notation? So is it going to look like traditional neumes, or is it going to look more like modern chant notation on the traditional 5-line staff?
Right. Very much 5-line round note, stemless notation. Just randomly opened, and there you see. Um, it follows the ISIL construct that they used in the Roman Missal, with some notes more closely grouped together. There are a few qualismas in here, the little squiggly things that help us get into the higher note from the lower note. Occasionally, there are dots to indicate a lengthening. There are bar lines, either a half bar or a full bar, to help understand where the breath should be. But it's a very comfortable, clean, stemless round note notation on 5 lines.
So let's spend a little bit more time on the hymns themselves. So you
Mhm.
mentioned, of course, that we have variety and options for melody, of course, and hymn tunes, but are there any other uses for the hymns in the Divine Office Hymnal?
Yeah. Um, so once again, I think a real benefit to this, whether for Liturgy of the Hours or for parish use, are not only the newer hymns for times of the day and the seasons, but saints' days and
Mm.
celebrations. So there are plenty of saints who now have their own hymn. Um, in this hymnal. There are a wider assortment of hymns for martyrs, pastors, virgins, doctors, pastors, all of the categories for memorials. Um, so it's going to be nice if um, the parish of Saint Benedict uh, now has a hymn that they can turn to that celebrates their own patronal feast. So um, once again, in the spirit of the hymns marking the day or the hour or the celebration, they can also do that in parish life on Sundays or feast days or whatever. So um, to see the hymns being used aside from the Liturgy of the Hours uh, is going to be a great enrichment that we'll now have available to us.
I agree entirely, especially with the struggle I have personally found to quite honestly find hymns for certain saint feast days. I think that'll be a
Mhm.
great addition in and of itself.
School masses,
Yes.
those of you who do conventions or for a group, and those hymns are always out there to find with a little bit of searching. But how nice to finally have something that really gathers them all up into one publication.
Absolutely. Now let's take it one step further and let's talk about reporting the hymns in the Divine Office Hymnal.
Mhm.
So, first off, are these hymns on one license currently?
Yes, the folks at ISIL and our folks in the bishop's office in DC, at the time it was Father Menke, and now Father Dowd is head of our conference committee of divine worship. They were very clear about making sure that these hymns get onto one license for use for those doing worship aids. Or programs. So yes, the hymns are available to be used. Yes.
Okay, so they're on one license. Are they available for reprint at this point in reporting, or is it just for text use only, or is it, or can we reprint these hymns?
Yes, they are there for reprinting. And once again, to remind folks, there is a pairing of text and tune. If you're not comfortable with that pairing, you can certainly sing the text to a different tune. Um, if any of you are doing your own parish hymnal or something, it's going to be asked that the tune and text appear as they do appear. But for one-time use or a celebration, you can certainly go ahead and access the text or tune. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention, of course, that, and I should have actually led with this, but listeners, if you're listening, this episode is not sponsored by GIA. But again, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that GIA is doing a product resource at NPM's convention this summer about the Divine Office Hymnal, correct?
Right. And thanks for the shout out to GIA. And I just want folks to know what happened was when the book was being produced, ISIL and the Bishops Committee here announced that they were looking for a publisher, and publishers made proposals. And I don't know how many publishers responded, but we were honored and happy to be able to do it because, gosh, I don't know how many hymnals we do. I think sometimes viewers are also not maybe aware of the non-Catholic hymnals we do or assist with. So hymnals really are one of our main activities here. So we were very happy to be asked to do the production of the book. Once again, we took what was given to us and publish it. And I think that, in fact, I know that I will be doing the product showcase in Kansas City. So for those watching, I'll try to come up with something different to make it worth your while there. And actually, we will do some singing through items so you can get a sense of the texts and tunes. And to be clear, when I say new material, it's not only new material from St. Jerome or St. Augustine, but also new material for hymns written over the last 20, 30 years that have now been translated into English. So to be clear, there certainly is a good amount of hymnody from the first centuries, but there are also newer expressions as well, newer authors and texts present.
Okay, great, great, excellent. If someone is listening and maybe they are not attending NPM's convention, where can they go online to find more information about the Divine Office Hymnal?
I would say on our website, there is a hymnals and missals page, and it will get you there. And I would also recommend that you go to the USCCB website. There's a lot of information and history about this in the Committee of Divine Worship newsletter. And our friends at FDLC also have some information about this. And I think there's also a couple of other webinars floating around out there that with a little bit of searching people could find. But it's good that this is so fresh and new that I think we're at that first level of just exploring the book, giving folks the basics, an understanding. And then I think once it starts to be used, we'll start to share all sorts of new experiences and understandings, or maybe even omissions or faults with the book. But right now, it's just a fun time to explore the book and see what's in there.
Well, Michael, this has been so enjoyable. I thank you sincerely for your time today and for sharing all of the wealth of information that is clearly in this hymnal. And I feel that this hymnal really will enrich the hymnody and liturgical life of those that use it, whether that's in a small group, a large parish. I think it's a great addition. And so thank you for your work on it, and thanks for your time today.
We are glad to be able to offer to the church at large. And you're right, it's not just for Liturgy of the Hours. It'll certainly enhance the Liturgy of the Hours, but personal prayer, Sunday celebrations, weekday celebrations, it's just a great gift to the church. And when we do our next hymnal, and just as there's always a new translation, there's always a new hymnal, it'll be fun to see which of these hymns have kind of bubbled to the top and now need to be included in future hymnals because of their popularity. So thanks for the chance to talk about this, and delighted to be doing this at Kansas City for the convention, and hope to see many folks there and looking forward to seeing you there. So thanks for this chance to visit.
Absolutely. See you there.